Hi everybody, we're now going to talk about classes and objects. And this is important because in Python, almost everything is stored as an object. And they belong to classes. And classes are structures which contain both data and functions. And in a class, functions are called methods. So when we're talking about classes and their objects, individual objects, then we're talking about what kind of data they have and what kind of methods they have. And we have seen one class, which is the list class. So we have in previous videos made lists of numbers. So for example, we're making a list by using these brackets, square brackets, and comma separated numbers in between. So here in the variable myList, which is a list variable, we set this equal to these four numbers, 1, 2, 2, and 3. And we can print the type of this myList variable. And we can, well, first we have to define myList and Control Enter to print the type. And we can see that when we print the type of the myList variable, it is of a class list. One way of thinking about classes is that they are kind of a baking mold. And you use the same baking mold to make different kinds of cakes, for example. But the baking mold makes sure that the cakes, they look the same. But the content of each individual cake can be different. So, for example, you can make an orange cake or a banana cake or an apple cake using the same mold. But you are using this mold to make individual cakes. And these individual cakes are the objects. So the baking mold is the class which gives you the general idea of what you are making, but the individual cakes, they are the objects. And these objects are given individual names like lemon pie 1, lemon pie 2, apple cake 1, etc. So they look the same, but they do not contain the same data, so to speak. So for example, we have a list here called myList, and it's of the class list, right? But you can make myOtherList, which contains 3 numbers. So both these lists are of the same class, which is the class list, but they have different names. One is called myList, the other is called myOtherList. And they may or may not contain the same data. Often they do not. So the list object here contains some data, but we have talked about the functions as well. So now we have seen that, well, the list objects, they contain data, but what are their functions, or in our case, methods? And we have a list here of some of the methods in the list class. For example, we have the append method, where you append a value at the end of the list or an element. You have the clear method, which removes all the elements from the list and you're left with the empty list. Or you have the copy, which returns a copy of the list. And quite special, these methods, when you have to use them, you use the dot notation. So for example, we can use the count method of the list class to return the number of elements with the specified value. So for example, in my list, we would like to count the number of 2s. So how many number 2 are there in my list? Well, we have one here and one here, so we have 2 of them. So if we run this piece of code, then we should return the number 2. If we add a 2 here and run this, then we should get a 3 because it is counting the number of instances containing 2. And if you have the object name here, then you just put a dot and the method name here. And then you sorry, and then you can use the method. But in Python, not all functions need to be class methods. For example, the print method or the print function is not a method because it does not pertain to a class. And now we get to why do we use classes anyways? Well, it actually makes sure that the methods, the functions, and the data correspond to each other. So if we are using the list class methods, then we know that these actually work on what lists usually contain. So that's why it's very safe to use these methods for the list class on list objects. So it really removes a lot of errors in your code. And when you use a class and make objects, then it also makes sure the object knows exactly or does exactly what it is expected to do. And the main benefit of classes is that you can make your own classes. So for example, if we would like to model companies, we could make a business class. No pun intended. So this time we would like to store the bank account or the amount of money in the bank account for this company. And we have to make sure that we can do something with this bank account. And companies, they can sell goods or services to get money. So the bank account will, or the amount in the bank account will increase. Or they can buy goods or services and thereby spend money. And then the amount in the bank account will diminish. So the actions actually tells you which methods you need. For example, if we go up here to the list class, all these methods, they do something. And what do they do? often they do something with the data contained in the list objects. For example, insert, it adds an element. Remove removes the first element with the specified value. Sort sorts the elements. So the data is what kind of variables do we need to store data, and the functions or the methods, they do something with the data. So let's get back to our user-defined class. To define a class, we have to write, of course, class. And then we have to write the name of the class. And we usually use a capital first letter in the user-defined name. And then we end with a colon. And here we have to define this initial method. So this is everywhere or always in your user-defined class. What you also have to remember in the method definitions in your class is to put self as the first parameter in the method. And after self, you can add your own parameters, which will take in some value from the user. So here we would like to, in this init or initial method, we would like to add what variables we need in our business class. And then when you add variables or modify them, you have to use self dot and then the variable name. So in this case, whenever we make an object molded by the business class, then we should take in, or we should get an argument, which is the initial account, and then this initial account should be set, or the amount in the initial account should be the amount in the bank account. So here we get bank account populated with an initial account value. And in this initial method, we defined our variables. We only needed one in our case. And later, we define our methods. So here, this initial method is just here to make a new instances, to make new object of the business class. The other methods are used to change any variables or use any variables in the business class. So for example, we define a function or a method which is called sale, which takes in self, which is the object, and sale. And this method ends with a colon here, and what this does is that it updates the bank account variable with the bank account plus the sale. And we also have a definition of a method or a function which takes in itself and a purchase amount. And of course, a function or a method ends with a colon. So this function or method takes or updates the bank account with the previous bank account amount minus any purchase done. Okay. So for example, if we run this code, we have this defined, this business class, which is a user-defined class. So for example, we can make an instance or an object of this class. And we do that by writing business and providing the initial account. And here the initial account is 100, and we put 100 in initial account and hence in the bank account. And this first object is called Toon Industries, or properties, I mean. And now we have run this cell. So now we have made a company called Thon Properties. And this company has 100 in the bank account. So for example, we can use the methods of the class. So for example, we can use the sale method, so it sells something. So then we have to provide the name of the object. It's like a variable name. And we use the dot notation and the name of the specified method. So now we have to provide the argument which goes into the sale parameter. And then we run this piece of code which updates the bank account with its own value plus the sale. So the old value in the bank account should be 100, and the new value, or the value for sale, is 40. So the new value for bank account should be 140. So we can run this cell, and the bank account for Thon Properties should be 140. But we can access the different variables in this Thon property object by just specifying the variable name with dot notation. So if we run this line of code, we are printing what is in the bank account for Thon Properties. And the way that the data is stored in this object is by a dictionary. And a dictionary has a key value pair. And the key is the variable name, or here it should not say Thon Properties, it should say, let's say, bank account. Like this. Okay. and we just control run this. Okay, so if we just check this Thon properties objects dictionary and control enter, then we have that bank account is the key and 140 is the value in this key value pair. And now even this text is updated. Okay, so we can make more instances of the business class, and we can make more method calls to the methods in each instance or object. So for instance here, we let Thon properties make a purchase of 100, and they make a sale of 175, and they make another purchase of 100. So how much do they have in their bank account? Well, we can print out the amount in Thon properties bank account. So if we run this, then there is indeed a typo. Okay, so the new amount in the bank account is 115. And we can also make an instance called Sunmud. It's of the business class, and the initial bank account is 2000. And Sunmud makes some small sales and a purchase. And they are left with 2004 in their bank account. So you see that you can, these are quite simple examples, but you can make these examples more advanced by adding more variables in the class and more methods in the class. And then you can model businesses, or you can model customers, or you can model stock prices, for example. And the last thing we are going to talk about today is that it's useful to make code which is displayed by the help function. So for example, within these triple quotes here, either triple double quotes or triple single quotes, you can add some code which is helping you or someone else to understand what this class actually does, what kind of variables it contains, and what kind of methods it contains. So if we run this cell and we type help business, then you get help on your user-defined function. And you can also get help on built-in classes like the string class. So if we run this, then we get a lot of text here. And at first you have some methods, but when the methods have these underscores, you just continue to the methods that you can actually use. So here you can see all the methods which you can use with strings. For example, the find function. And then you just type the variable name of your string variable dot find and what this function should look for. So this is how you can define your own classes, make objects, and define which data they should contain and which methods they should contain.